system. You can actually track and create certificates for goods that are produced with those certain conditions. The client can make sure his goods are transported to the right conditions and timing. So interestingly, the milk manufacturers that are actually using such solutions today in the UAE with IoT sensors that are now able to track exactly how they are produced, how they are transported, whether they meet all the right conditions. A broker. So it's difficult to certify the origin and the path of the goods bought and sold. So now you can actually easily check the origin of the goods and the transformation path in the blockchain. From a consumer's perspective, it's obviously very difficult to verify the compliance, the origin, the composition of the goods to be bought. Interestingly, there was this huge problem where there was a huge recall in meat that was actually produced, and on inspection they found out, so I think it was beef or something else, but on inspection they found out that about 78% of the constituents was not even beef, it was horse meat. So where did this issue happen? Later they found out that it wasn't at the manufacturer side, it was actually in the packaging division where this happened. So now you have a full view on the goods bought, so that is provenance, and you have a complete view of the transformation process, and you can basically look at the entire flow of information. Some of the other use cases when we look at how blockchain can actually transform. So if you look at supply chain operations, you can look at sort of an auctioning system. You can look at a buying and selling. There's a lot of e-commerce platforms coming out there where the entire supply chain is on blockchain. You have product visibility. Provenance is something that is quite interesting. You can actually track where the primary material for the production is actually being produced. You can actually see if it meets certain conditions that are required from a quality perspective. And if it meets, then you basically pay the producers what they are worth. So in terms of coffee, there's a company that has actually done this in Thailand. It's called Coffee Chain, and they've basically tried to solve this problem of giving what the producers are worth based on the quality of coffee, and also looking at how and if they meet all the contractual obligations. From a finance point of view also, trade finance is a huge use case. Now, the issue with most supply chain, the chain in itself, there's a net 30 days, net 40-day payment terms on meeting certain conditions. And that net 30, net 40 kind of goes extended. With smart contracts, now we are able to actually specify the conditions that need to be met and then automatically make the payments. So this solves a lot of problems in the entire chain of events as well. So I have my next 4 minutes. I'll just try to wrap it up quickly. So what are the hurdles in the chain? First of all, it is a nascent technology. There aren't any standards as yet. So we're working on different frameworks, right? So we've got Hyperledger, we've got EOS, we've got Stellar for payments, we've got so many different platforms. Interoperability is going to be one of the biggest issues in the coming future. We're working on a solution right now with Dubai Smart Government, where we're looking at solving the interoperability between a couple of the more common frameworks out there. The digital or physical link, like I mentioned, there's a big use case for IoT and blockchain integration. IoT and device or sensor certifications are something that are coming up now. There are over 1 billion sensor devices out there. Edge computing is going to be huge. The level of tokenization of information is really important. So at what level do you actually tokenize information? So let's say you have apple juices coming. So do you tokenize at an Apple level or a crate of apples? So that's a decision that needs to be taken at a governance level, an IT and governance level. This is also going to bring up a lot of new infrastructure challenges as well, especially with IoT. And lastly, the most important thing is having an overall agreement in supply chain on using blockchain. So it isn't one party that's actually taking the initiative. It's a consortium. There's going to be multiple stakeholders involved. You've got suppliers, you've got producers, you've got manufacturers, distributors, and it starts with one small step. So that's leading me to the next slide, which is where do you start? So it's interesting that the start of the thing always is a pilot. And the reason is you need to start getting the stakeholders involved. So understanding your supply chain weaknesses, start with solving those weaknesses first rather than just putting a solution in place. I think the last speaker spoke about blockchain being an enabler. It is an enabler, it isn't your business, right? Review your supply chain as an upstream as much as possible and identify the weaknesses and risks you will face. Quality of data is something that you would need to focus on. Start small, start with a typical use case. Collaboration is key, especially in a blockchain deployment, and scale progressively. Start small and then scale big. So when I spoke about the use case that we've done in Indonesia, it's got 7 levels of suppliers, 2 levels of manufacturers. There are about 7 banks involved, microfinance houses, and then there's distributors. But it all started with 2 banks first, and then scaled progressively. It's interesting to understand that when you do such a project, everyone's got their own systems, legacy systems that you need to integrate with. So these projects aren't small, they take time, but once it's implemented, it saves a lot of money and increases the efficiency on the entire system. So that's it from me. I'm reachable at Shamir@Akibits. That's what my Twitter handle. If you have any discussions, please feel free to reach me. I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamir. We have time for one question before the break.
It's interesting about your comment on starting small, because despite all the benefits which you put forward very clearly on the advantages for the supply chain, actual adoption has actually been really erratic. And I'll give you an example, IBM and that container, trade lanes, big names, dominant container supplier, and yet they found it very hard to get other parties on board. So what is holding back broad adoption of blockchain on the supply chain?
So, it isn't about the big guns getting involved in the solution. So just to cite an example, we are involved on putting the land registry on blockchain where IBM was involved. And sorry, it isn't one company that is able to actually bring forth a solution. There are multiple companies involved. The challenge that I see in actually rolling out such a solution is to get all the entities on board. And especially in blockchain, you're actually talking about bringing trust to an economy where inherently there isn't trust. And you are exposing a lot of information. So when you have a blockchain-based solution, you are expecting these stakeholders to exchange information across it transparently. The question arises about data security, about how this information is going to be used, whether it will actually create problems later on. So there's a lot of learning. So even one solution that's deployed in one part of the world isn't replicable easily. So we've built our own protocols in terms of having data exchange, providing the security. So I think that's one. So working with government entities, I've seen that one of the biggest challenges is about how is my data going to be used? Is it going to be misused for various other purposes? And the best way to go about it is to start small, show them how they are actually going to be using their data, show them the real value, and then scale from there. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
So talking about coffee is a break time. We take 15 minutes. We start sharp 5 to 3. You can, the refreshment is in the exhibition hall. And you can bring your refreshment back in here and, to make a little bit use of time. So, see you soon.